there isn't anything better to have than a problem that's worth solving. That's really worth solving. The more of that you can take on, the more you have a reason to get out of the bed in the morning no matter what. I'm getting up, I'm trudging forward, it doesn't matter what I'm suffering from. I've got things that need to be done, they're necessary, and that gives you the sense of purpose. That is the antidote to bitterness. There is a lot of different ways to interpret the world, and you can maybe even make a case that there is an endless number of ways to interpret the world. The problem with that is it disorients you in the terms of what you should be doing. But just because there is a very large number of ways to interpret the world doesn't mean there is a very large number of productive, meaningful, and sustainable ways to interpret the world. These people that you're comparing yourself to, you don't really know very well. What that means is that you see their shiny outside, but you don't see the reality of their life. Well, first of all, there is a danger in just comparing yourself to others, period. Because they're not you, and only God knows what struggles they had to undertake to get to where they were, or what burdens they're currently carrying that you're not aware of. But you can certainly contrast yourself with yourself, and that's a lot better. The possibility that you can make yourself slightly better on a continual basis is, I think that's something that's accessible to everyone. I think that's equivalent to leading a virtuous life. If you do not listen to that thing that beckons you forward, you will pay for it like you cannot possibly imagine. You have everything that's terrible about life in your life, and nothing about it that's good. And worse, you will know that it was your fault and that squandered what you could have had. Always take into account the cost of what you're doing now, because what people tend to think is, whatever I'm doing now is risk-free. Here is a bunch of options. It's like, no, whatever you're doing right now has all sorts of risks. You're just blind to them because you've habituated to them. They've become invisible. So if you keep yourself in the fog, then you cannot tell when you screwed up. Now, that's not so good because you're still screwing up. You're just too blind, self-blind to notice. Although in the short term, there is less painful. If you make your criteria for success rather sharp, then you know every time you screw up. But that's great because then you could fix it. Maybe you could adjust your damn plan. Either way, you can fix it. It seems to me you might as well make it the best one you could live in because you don't have anything better to do. Enjoy those big pedals. There are always people out there who are doing far better than you in pretty much anything you want to imagine. And if all you're doing is seeing yourself in their reflected light, let's say, then it's gonna be pretty damn dismal. But it's not a good comparison because, well, first of all, there is a danger in just comparing yourself to others, period. Because they're not you, and only God knows what struggles they had to undertake to get to where they were, or what burdens they're carrying currently that you're not aware of. But you can certainly trust yourself with yourself, and that's a lot better. It is the only way, well, it's also the only way of really measuring anything approximating proper improvement. You can actually tell when you're a little better than you were yesterday, and you can actually do that. That's another thing that's so interesting about it, that you can actually make yourself a little better in some way, pretty much. Well, I don't know if it's every moment, but you can certainly do it every day. Be careful who you share good news with, because you don't want to share good news with people who are gonna be genuinely happy for you, and be careful you share bad news with, because that's equally tricky. You want someone who will listen to you when you're having trouble and allow you your grief. Beauty calls to their higher being, I would say, and to make friends with beauty is to introduce yourself very carefully to one of the mysteries of life that make it worth living. There's never been a better time for the majority of people to be alive. In the future, although your vulnerable and terrible thing can always happen to us, it's hard to make case that the future doesn't look comparatively positive. We're becoming extremely technologically sophisticated, and the world is changing at an incredibly rapid pace. And the only way you're doing to be able to manage that in a positive way, if each of us, or as many of us as possible, are capable of making wise and careful and truthful decisions. And if we do that, then maybe things can continue to improve. You can get people to stand up on their own 2 feet and to adopt responsibility if everything is given to them. And that's a real conundrum. You know, maybe you're in California, see someone speeding down the road in convertible Porsche. You think, oh man, what a lucky bastard. And the truth of the matter is that he's thinking about wrapping his expensive car around the next cement piler that he comes close to. You can cannot tell. People have hard lives, and even people who are comparatively fortunate have hard lives. The ideal that you're observing that make you jealous or resentful is in large part an illusion that's created by your own mind. You have to be careful what are you jealous of, because you don't really know what it is. And then the other thing that's useful is to understand you're quite different from other people, and you shouldn't be comparing yourself to them because they're not like you. They don't have your family, they don't have your temperament, they don't have your troubles, they don't have your abilities. The only person that has those is you. One of the rules, I think, it's rule 4 is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. See, that's a game you can win. The possibility that you can make yourself slightly better on a continual basis is, I think, that's something that's accessible to everyone. I think that's equivalent to leading a virtuous life, and there is something to be said for virtue and truth. And that's one thing. Another thing that I've noticed about people who've been phenomenally successful is that they really do everything they can to live a truthful life, and you can get a bloody long way by being honest. You gotta know that there are differences in intelligence. It's really important. If you go into a job and you're not smart enough for that job, you're gonna have one bloody miserable time. You're gonna make life wretched for the people around you because you won't be able to handle the position. But what you really want to do, as far as I can tell, if you want to maximize your chances for both success and, let's say, well-being, is you want to find a strata of the occupation in which you would have an intelligence that would put you in the upper quartile. That's perfect. Then you're a big fish in a smart pond, and you don't want to be this. You don't want to be the stupidest guy in the room. It's a bloody rough place to be, and you probably don't want to be the smartest guy in the room either, because what that probably means is you should be in a different room. If you want to be the best at what you're doing, bar none, then having an IQ is above 145 is a necessity, and maybe you're pushing 160 in some situations, and maybe that's making you a person as a one person in 10,000s or even 100,000s. And then also, to really good at it, you probably have to be reasonably stress tolerant and also somehow conscientious. Why is it that smart people are at the top of dominance hierarchies? And the answer to that is because they get there first. I mean, everything's is race, roughly speaking, and the faster you are, the more likely you'll be at the forefront of the pack. And intelligence is a large part of is speed. That's not all it is. So if you're moving forward something difficult rapidly, the faster people are gonna get there first. You're gonna have to put some effort into your life. And you need to be motivated to do that. And so what's your potential source of motivation? You could think about them in a big 5 manner. If you're extroverted, you want friend. If you're agreeable, you want an intimate relationship. If you're disagreeable, you want to win competitions. If you're open, you want to engage in a creative activity. If you're high neuroticism, you want security. Okay, so those are all sorts of potential motivation that you could draw on, that you could tailor to your own personality. But then there are dimensions that you want to consider your life across. And so we ask people about, well, if you could have your life the way you wanted it in 3 or 5 years, if you were taking care of yourself properly, what would you want from your relationship? What would you want from your intimate relationship? What would you like to structure your family? What do you want for your career? How are you going to use your time outside of your job? And how are you gonna regulate your mental and physical health? And maybe also your drug and alcohol use, because that's a good place to aggro down, and that tangles in your incentive reward system. We talked about demographic incentive reward system, and that's the thing that keeps them moving forward. And the way it works is that it works better if it produces positive emotion when it can see you moving forward a valued goal. Okay, well, what's the implication of that? Better have a valued goal, because otherwise you can't get any positive motivation. Most creative people fail at producing their creative product and monetizing it. So your default position, if you're a creative person, it's gonna fail. And that's because it's hard to come up with something new. It's hard to present it to the market at the right time. And it's hard to market it. The things are really, really difficult. And so what successful entrepreneurs do is they just keep doing over and over and over and over and over and over. And eventually, if there is fortunate, one of their ideas happen to hit the right place at the right time. Even if your idea is good, that doesn't mean it will be successful. There is so many things that have to be taken into account. So this is partially why persistence, and that's part of conscientious, is so useful. It's like persistence is helpful because it enables you to run many experts and experiments. And you need to know that the baseline is failure. It's important because otherwise you will blame that on yourself, and some of that useful because there are probably some things that you could improve yourself. But it's very difficult to go from 0 to 1. Stop drinking too much. How do you know if you're drinking too much? You regret. What you do when you're drinking, it's interfering with other important goals. It's causing you financial distress. It's getting you in trouble with your friends or your family. It's getting you trouble with the police. Stop abusing substances if you can, right? If you see that they're hurting you, physical health, are you in decent shape? Are you strong and coordinated? And if you're not, you would better if you were. You would feel better. You would be more effective. You would live longer, and you would be less sick. And you really see that momentum. If someone being in a shape once in their life, they age way better. And it's also a really good way of maintaining your cognitive ability. When you hear about those exercises that you can do online or make you smarter and keep your cognitive ability intact, those don't work. There is no evidence that they work. Exercise works, cardiovascular and weightlifting. You start to decline in your fluid intelligence at about age of 25, and it's a linear trend downhill, and it can accelerate as you get older. It's just like this, quite ugly. If you exercise, you stave that off, maintain your relationship and foster them. So when I look at successful people, they're really good at something. They're reliable. You can count on their words. They're generous, and they have a wide connection network, which becomes more and more valuable as you get older. So it's one advantage that older people really have over young people. They have a connection network, and a connection network is huge. Well, you could be connected to 1,000 well-connected people. Okay, that means you are connected to the entire world. It is unbelievably valuable, and that's one of the things that's so absolutely remarkable about the situation that I'm in right now. As far as one of the great benefits is, I can contact pretty much anybody and they will talk to me. It's like, really? That's so cool. Having a connection network of an inestimable value, reliability, generosity. You can work on both of these. Have sophisticated sense of the world. You find, for example, that you're doing things for the other people is actually more rewarding than virtually anything else you can do. When you hear you should be of service to other people, well, if you actually watch yourself, you pay attention to yourself, and you do something that helps someone else, and it genuinely helps them, I defy you find another experience that is satisfying. It's actually quite stunning how satisfying that is, and so that's a very useful thing to realize. There is no better life strategy. If the ethical argument is put properly, it is by far the most compelling argument. It's like if you want to have everything you could possibly want and more, then be a good person. The better a person you are, the more likely that is to happen. That doesn't mean that you're completely protected against getting cut off at the knee, but there is a better strategy. When my health fell apart and I was in the hospital or multiple hospitals for a long period of time, I stopped doing everything I was doing. Everything I was doing was difficult. My clinical practice was difficult. The professorial job was difficult, and the company I was running was difficult. The writing was difficult. The lecturing was difficult. It was all difficult, and I'm not complaining about it at all, but because it was difficult, I have to be in really good shape to do it. And so then I wasn't in really good shape. So because it wasn't in really good shape and everything I had done was difficult, I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't get back on top of things because I was like trying to jump into a car going 200 miles an hour. It's very easy for us to call people who are doing something that we're not doing stupid. It's like, don't be so sure about that. And it would have been better for me if I would have had a wider variety of skills that weren't so high intensity. I could have had some leisure activity that I got good at. Music might have been good that weren't so damaging and demanding. See, what I tried to do if I saw something was difficult, I wanted to master it. I was driven to do that just to see how far I could go in these multiple directions. And that left me vulnerable to one thing. It left me vulnerable to being in a situation where I wasn't healthy enough to manage it. It certainly doesn't hurt to be a good physical condition. So we can walk through it. Stop drinking too much. How do you know if you're drinking too much? You regret what you do when you're drinking. It's interfering with other important goal. It's causing you financial distress. It's getting you in a trouble with your friend or your family. It's getting you in trouble with the police. Stop abusing substances if you can. If you see that they're hurting you, physical health, are you in a decent shape? Are you strong and coordinated? And if you're not, you would be better if you were. You would feel better. You would be more effective. You live longer. You would be less sick. And you really see that mount up. If someone's been in a shape once in their life, they age way better. And it's also a really good way of maintaining your cognitive ability. You hear about these exercises that you can do online to make you smarter or to keep your cognitive ability intact. Those don't work. There is no evidence that they work. Exercise works, cardiovascular and weightlifting. You start to decline in your fluid intelligence at the age of 25, and it's linear trend downhill, and it can accelerate as you get older. It's like this, quite ugly. If you exercise, you strive that of maintaining your relationship and foster them. So when you look at successful people, they're really good at something. They're reliable. You can count on their words. They're generous, and they have a wide connection network, which becomes more and more valuable as you get older. So it's one advantage that older people really have over young people. They have a connection network, and connection network is huge. Well, you could be connected to the thousands of well-connected people. Okay, that means you're connected to the entire world, right? It's unbelievably valuable, and that's one of the things that's so absolutely remarkable about the situation that I'm in right now. As far as one of the great benefits is I can contact pretty much anybody, and they'll talk to me. It's really, when you don't get what you want, then a landscape of questions emerge. And these questions can resonate through different levels of your identity, from the trivial, oh, I told the joke wrong, to the profound, there is nothing desirable about me, and I'll be alone for the rest of my life. It's daunting to even consider that. And that there is a discipline and responsibility that necessitates, which is also daunting. It's also, oh my God, the problem that's serious. I'm really gonna have to get me act together in order to not contribute to it, much less solve it. And so the problem is terrible, and then the solution is daunting. When I commit to something and make sacrifices, if something's valuable, you will make sacrifice to attain it. And then discovery of sacrifice, it's one of the primary factors separating human beings from animals, because we discovered that we could let go of something we could value in the present, and we would gain something we value even more in the future. God, aim at something, it's like. Otherwise your life is meaningless. Well, what should you aim at? Well, I don't know. Well, pick something, aim at it. As you move toward it, you will get wiser, and then maybe your aim will change. That's okay, but at least it'll change in an informed way. It's like discipline yourself in one dimension. So what happens? Well, that's exciting. Let's say you want to become who you could be in the fullest sense. So let's say you're someone who's gonna solve some serious problem, okay? The first thing you have to do is admit to the seriousness of the problem. That's no joke. And so the first thing, the terror of the problem itself, and that's enough to paralyze you, right? And that's the Hydra. That's the Gorgon with the head of snakes. It's paralyze you and turn you to stone. That's the basilisk of the Harry Potter series. You look at it and it turns you to stone. That lurks underneath everything, right? And it is malevolence and tragedy, and so there is that. And then the next is, well, you're gonna take responsibility for that. You're really going to do that, are you? That's a hell of a load, man. And so it's daunting to even consider that. And then there is discipline and responsibility that necessitates, which is also daunting. It's like, oh my God, the problem that's serious. I'm really gonna have to get my act together in order to not contribute to it, much less solve it. And so the problem is terrible, and then the solution is daunting. But the upside of that is like, well, there isn't anything better to have than a problem that's worth solving, like that's really worth solving, right? And so the more of that you take on, the more you have a reason to get out of the bed in the morning. No matter what, I think I'm getting up, I'm trudging forward. It doesn't matter what I'm suffering from. I've got things that need to be done. They're necessary, and that gives you the sense of purpose. That's the antidote to bitterness. Okay, well, let's say you want your life to be meaningful. It's okay. Then what you do matter. It actually matters. So that an interesting thing. So let's say you go over your past with fine-tooth comb, and you decide you're gonna take responsibility of everything that you did that was wrong and everything that you failed to do that you could have done that was right. It's like, does that change the world? It's like, it depends on how truthfully you do it. You might say it changes the world like nothing else possibly can, and I think that's actually right. You have to allow yourself to contain latitude for error. That's a useful thing to know too. One of the things I tell people when they're trying to develop a vision for their life or an implementable plan is to make a bad plan. Make the best one you can, but don't get obsessive about it. It's like, make a plan, implement it. You will figure out when you implement is why it's stupid, exactly, and then you can fix it a little bit. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who you somebody else today. The same basic idea, right, is that you have to get your markers for success, right? Because otherwise you can end up in the situation you described, which is like there is anything you want to imagine. And if all you're doing seeing yourself in the reflected light, let's say, then it's gonna be pretty damn dismal. But it's not a good comparison because you shouldn't just compare. Well, first of all, there is a danger in just comparing yourself to others, period, because they're not you. And only God knows what struggles they had to undertake to get to where they were or what burdens they're currently carrying you're not aware of. You just don't know any of that. But you can certainly contrast yourself with yourself, and that's a lot better. It's the only way, well, it's also the only way of reality of really mastering anything approximating proper improvement. You can actually tell when you're a little better than you were yesterday, right? So, and you can actually do that. That's another thing that's so interesting about it, is that you can actually make yourself a little better in some way, pretty much. Well, I don't know if it is every moment, but you can certainly do it every day. It's funny. I mean, obviously if you have a problem and you think about it, you can think up to a solution, and it's not obvious how you do that, I mean, it's not like, how you're manipulating you're nervous or something. It happens of its own accord in some sense. Like you can participate in it, I guess. You can interfere with it, and it seems to take certain amount of willpower, and it still all happens mysteriously behind the scenes. One of the things that have been so there is lots of different ways to interpret the world, and you can maybe even make a case that there is an endless number of ways to interpret the world. And the problem with that is it kind of disorients you in terms of what you should be doing. But just because there is a very large number of ways to interpret the world doesn't mean there is a very large number of productive, meaningful, and sustainable ways to interpret the world. And one of the things that you do is figure out how you can conduct yourself today so that you don't upset in a week or a month or a year. And so you know that what you do in some sense psychologically is you admit to yourself that your current frame of reference is faculty, and then you start opening the door to a different kind of thinking, which is more creative thinking. It's more lateral thinking. Think, well, I'm wrong, but that's not necessarily a problem because I could be right if I thought some other ways. Well, no, that's great. Often it works, yeah, and there is almost no luck. There is almost no end to the utility of trying to figure out which ways that you're wrong, because there is lots of them, and every time you discover one, then you don't have to be quiet so wrong anymore. That's really good idea. Today is like a page in a book. Of course, there are many pages in the book, but the page repeats. And so one of the things I often had my clients do, I'll tell you a little story. I had one client who was spending about 45 minutes a night fighting with his young son about when to go to the bed. And so, they weren't having a pleasant time because of it. It was just a constant battle, and it's very common of parents or young children to be locked in a battle, and that occurs every day. Sometimes it's around eating, sometimes it's toilet training, sometimes it's general behavioral issues, sometimes it's a bedtime. So we did some arithmetic. It's like, okay, 40 minutes a day, so it's 280 minutes a week. So let's say 5 hours, it's 20 hours a month, it's 240 hours a year. That's 6 weeks, that's month and a half. You're spending a month or half of work weeks doing nothing but fighting with your son. What makes you think you're doing to like him? You think, well, it's only 40 minutes a day. It's like, don't be fool yourself. oneself. Anything that every day is significant percentage of your life, because what? You're awake, let's say 16 hours, 5 of those hours are basically maintenance. So you got 11, and then 7 of those are work. So now you're down to 4. And so if you're spending 15 minutes a day doing something painful or stupid, then you do it every day. It's like 10% of your productive life. And it's really useful to get, because people think backwards. They think, well, I have a vacation coming up and that's really important. It's like, no, it's not. You're not gonna do it once. It's not that important. How you treat each other at lunchtime, if you eat together every day, that's your life. Fix that. Get it so that the food is good. Get it so that you're happy with the people that are sitting there. Fix that. It's like proof. 10% of your life is fixed. Well, you admit that there is a problem first, and then you ask for minimum necessary intervention, which could be alright. Well, I'd like to move forward on this some small amount that someone like you could actually manage, and I would be willing to carry it out. And then you reorient the way you're thinking as a consequence of that, and something usually pops out of the abyss to guide you. It's very strange, but it's not really any stranger than the fact that we can think at all, because the fact that we can is actually very strange. It's strange, like the fact that we can dream is strange, and the strange beyond belief that you can dream that something in your dreams, which is much better way of thinking about it, because it's not like you're really in control of your dreams. Just happens.